I am making this post to speak out against a particularly vile form of racism that is being promoted at the highest levels of our society. This disgusting xenophobic bigotry is shamelessly displayed at major news organizations such as CNN, MSNBC, and the New York Times. I am speaking of Russophobia, the irrational fear and hatred of Russians. Every day, the mainstream media expose us to a barrage of anti-Russian propaganda. Supposedly, Donald Trump has conspired with Vladimir Putin to take over the United States. Not only is this fake news, it is hate speech and literally an act of violence against the Russian community. Russophobia is basically Nazism. You know who else hated Russians? Adolf Hitler. Do I have to explain that Russians are human beings? News editors at CNN and the New York Times, educate yourselves. Stop viewing everything from your bigoted and ethnocentric perspective, in which the United States is always the good guy. Stop pushing this racist notion that Russians are scary and evil. Russians are a beautiful people with a beautiful culture. They have amazing food. They love to drink and party. Think of all the great Russian restaurants that we could have in New York and Washington, D.C. if we had more Russians in the upper levels of the U.S. establishment. Imagine the benefits of diversity. You could be smoking hookah with a bunch of Russians in a dark room, eating salt fish and washing it down with shots of vodka or a tall glass of kvass, instead of sitting in Starbucks with your latte like a nerd. Are you afraid that your gated community will be invaded by a bunch of guys in tracksuits who squat on the sidewalk chewing sunflower seeds? That's just a racist stereotype. Let go of your fear and embrace change. The Russians just want to live peacefully with us. Some vile bigots are stirring up anti-Russian sentiment by claiming that the Russians are anti-LGBTQPIIZ 849. This is a misunderstanding of a complex and beautiful culture. It is like claiming that Islam is anti-gay or oppressive to women. Obviously, neither claim is true, because the only oppressive culture is Western culture, and Russians are from the East. Their culture can only be a source of deep wisdom and tasty food. Some disgusting racists are promoting the idea that jobs will be lost if Russians undocumentedly migrate into the U.S. establishment. These crybabies are just afraid of change. Are you worried that a Russian will take your job at the Pentagon? Are you afraid that RT will replace CNN? Oh, the poor little baby needs his mommy. Grow up. Besides, the United States isn't your country. It is everyone's country. We are stronger together. no one should be blocked from entering the country or barred from participating in its political processes. It's time to get rid of the barriers that divide us, such as NATO. There should be no obstacles to the free flow of leadership into the West. Undocumented citizens should be allowed to vote, and undocumented leaders, such as Vladimir Putin, should be allowed to rule by decree. It's high time that we had more Russians in positions of power in the West, bringing their unique perspectives to the table. And I have a great candidate for the first president of the United Russian States of America. The replacement of the current U.S. establishment by a new Russian establishment is a natural process. Opposition to this change is hateful bigotry that must be stamped out by any means necessary. If a few tanks have to roll down a few streets, well, that's a small price to pay for diversity. And if a few jobs get outsourced to the Kremlin, so what? The economic benefits of establishment diversity will more than compensate for a few lost jobs. We should welcome Russians into the U.S. establishment. After all, it is the current year. No borders, no nations. Diversity is our greatest strength. We are all human. Love, not hate. End Russophobia now.